Hey guys, welcome to JReviews DLC, a show which focuses on DLC, expansions, and mods for games that I have covered on JReviews in earlier episodes, and for other games of interest. I am Iceman, and the content covered today is for Cyberpunk 2077, which I covered back in episode 16, with discussion of where the game is at in 2024, what changes have come to the game since I last covered it, and going through the Phantom Liberty expansion. So prior to my recent playthrough, I had last played through the game in 2022. Since that point, quite a bit has changed in the game, with some changes only being added just prior to my recent playthrough. Here is the main changes that have made it to the base game. The first change is in a completely revamped and improved police system. In 2022 and earlier, the police in Cyberpunk had a nasty habit of teleporting to the player's location once the wanted meter was up. That now is completely gone, replaced with a more realistic GTA style of police zeroing in on the player's position in search radiuses. A definite good improvement to the game and a definite move towards better realism. And if you really tick them off, they'll send in the military against you, where things get very interesting. Gameplay change number 2 was the biggest change to the game, launched just prior to Phantom Liberty's release, and that was of a completely revamped skill tree. Completely gone is a system of old and replaced with one where every tree has useful perks worthy of acquisition, and one you likely won't get to fully max out, as once you're at the max level, that's it for skill points, besides the occasional points you can find out in the game world, which are few and far between. The third change is the requirement of a SSD hard drive to play the game. SSD or solid state drive hard drives, which were optional in earlier versions of the game, are now a requirement. Without their use, you can expect to see regularly texture and model pop in, falling out of levels, etc., just as like I did in my earlier playthrough. The difference when you switch to an SSD drive, however, is a night and day change, with near seamless graphical fidelity and a vastly improved overall visual experience to the game. This one is a bit mixed, as on one side it's definitely good to see the game looking and running better, without a lot of the nasty bugs which plagued earlier builds, but requiring users to go purchase a potentially expensive piece of equipment just to be able to play your game properly is a bit annoying. Change number 4 is vehicle combat. You now have the ability to aim and shoot from the first person in vehicle sections of the game, which adds an extra level of realism into the mix, another positive change. Gameplay change number 5 is improved NPC and enemy AI. Now this one I did not notice at all in my playthrough, but apparently what was added in was more smarter behaviors for enemies based on player actions like throwing grenades, etc., and improved tactics. And for the NPC and acting more intelligently on the road when driving, avoiding obstacles, etc. As I said though, this is not one I noticed in my playthrough. If anything, the enemy AI was still stupid, and would get into odd driving loops under certain conditions. Gameplay change number 6 is level scaling. If you've played any of the last Elder Scrolls games or Fallout, then level scaling should be familiar already to you. But if you've not heard of it, it entails keeping all enemies to be at a similar level and scale of equipment comparable to the player at all times. This has its negatives and positives. On the positives end, it results in a regularish level of challenge at all times throughout the game, and for good loot to always be available, and allows the player to go wherever the game will let them go from the get-go. The negative is that it can make games too difficult sometimes. In Cyberpunk's case though, I never felt the game got too hard ever, so this is another welcome change. Gameplay change number 7 is a train transit system. This is one for the serious role players out there, and for those looking for that extra level of realism, as you can now hop onto trains to take you to certain locations in the city. It's certainly not as quick as simply driving to a location or fast travelling for that matter, but it is something that's really cool to do at least once in the game, and provides for a more scenic method of travel. Overall, it's another positive change, and would have been good to see a quest or two make use of this in some form or another. Gameplay change number 8 was the addition of 3 new radio stations. You now have access to 89.7 Growl FM, which is the first of the new stations added and features music from the community with a bit of everything from electronic to techno, rap, and more. Impulse 99.9 is the first of the 2 electronic-focused radio stations, remixed by the actor and artist Idris Elba, which features in Phantom Liberty. 107.5 Darkstar is the last of the new stations and focuses on electronic music as well. The final gameplay change was one of general fixes to gameplay and quests, with less overall bugs game-wide. Nothing particular to specifically highlight on this one, just more of an overall, more or less bug-riddled gameplay experience overall. On this one, I could definitely see the improvement to the overall game in my most recent playthrough, though the game is certainly not bug-free. It is much more stable, however, and provides a far better experience all in all. And that's the main changes to make it into the game since 2022. On to Phantom Liberty. Phantom Liberty is the first and very likely only expansion that will be released for Cyberpunk 2077. It was released on the 26th of September 2023. Before you are able to take on the content of this expansion, however, you first need to have proceeded quite a bit in the main game, roughly up to where you're a few steps away from taking your big choice in which end path to take down. It is at that point that the new game region Dogtown opens up, and you're able to proceed into the new content that this expansion brings. So what does it add to the main game? So as mentioned, Phantom Liberty adds the new region of Dogtown to the game. Unlike much of the areas in the main game, Dogtown has a far more ruined and Warzone-like style of appearance to it, which for much of the region is in dire need of repair. You can travel around some of it via car, but much of it will require on-foot traversal. On seeking entry to Dogtown, you're going to immediately gain access to the new relic skill system. There is not a heap of new perks, with only 9 being available, but with this new system there is now relic data terminals strewn all over Dogtown, which you will need to find and activate to acquire points towards these new perks. Throughout your travels of Dogtown, you will come across several new tarot cards acquirable via scanning, just as in the main game. There are only a few added, but if you're looking for something extra to do, then trying to get all of the new ones added with the new region should keep you busy for a short while, though some you will only come across in the main new story that comes with the region. With the addition of the new region of Dogtown sees the adding of a new faction in the form of the Barghest Militia, led by the leader Kurt Hansen, who years earlier had led the force on a mission aiming to fight for control of all of the city, but after a truce was achieved by his commanders, went against their orders and remained as leader of the Dogtown region, which his forces had taken control of. Once you're in Dogtown and begin progressing through its new main storyline, you'll gain access to a bunch of new side quests. These were a varied bunch, with some being from the new key fixer known as Mr. Hands, some from existing characters from the main game, and others from an assortment of other characters. Of these, the vast majority were all good and quite varied, with the overall task to be complete and what you need to do to accomplish the jobs not all being the same type of thing, which was good. Several, in typical Cyberpunk 2077 style, had important choices to make at key points, which would have flow-on effects to how they turned out and what happened after. The side quests for Mr. Hands were my favourite, as I was role-playing as a merc dedicated to fulfilling jobs without factoring in ethical issues into the mix. There was one quest in particular though that I just flat out refused to partake in, as it involved drug use, which is against my personal ethics. I am glad that that particular one was not required to continue on the main quest line, but it was annoying that the game gave no other option to proceed in that particular quest, in a game that is usually all about player choice and giving them multiple ways on how to solve things. Beyond that, the side quests were all excellent. Another new feature added with the expansion is combat zones. These are Cyberpunk's versions of dungeons essentially. with a base or small area to delve into, filled to the brim with enemies, with a reward at the end of higher-end gear, as well as a relic data terminal. I found these to be quite fun and challenging, but there was only a few that I could find in Dogtown, which was disappointing. Would have been good to see several more of these included. However, the new biggest addition by far in Phantom Liberty is in the new main questline, featuring the well-known actor Idris Elba as Solomon Reed and several other excellent voice actors. In the new questline, you were initially tasked with rescuing President Rosalind Myers from a crash site, and then later on to take on the region's leader, Kurt Hansen. I won't delve too much into the overall story so as not to spoil how things go, but I will say that it's very well done, and good length of approximately 25 hours or so was my experience of the expansion as a whole. And that's a pretty good length in my book. Two particular story bits I will mention that were of major highlights for me was of a musical performance that was spectacular to see in-game. That was amazing. The other was towards the end of the expansion, where things completely changed gears to more of a survival horror along the lines of Amnesia: The Dark Descent and other similar games, with you having to stealth through an abandoned underground bunker while being hunted by a robot bent on your destruction. That particular segment had some truly terrifying moments that will have you fearing every step you take. Really damn good stuff in those two story bits I've mentioned. The final key addition with the expansion is that of a new ending. As like with the main story, I'm not going to delve into it so as not to spoil it, but what I will say is to keep a box of tissues handy. It's not one that I will forget anytime soon. You will need to complete the main quest line of Phantom Liberty to be able to access it though, and even then, only under certain circumstances will it unlock. This new ending was only added to the game in a patch in May of 2024. On the subject of bugs, this being Cyberpunk 2077, of course there was bugs, but there was not any of regular occurrence like in earlier versions of the game. There was the usual AI related bugs of enemies standing still, not doing anything on occasion, but beyond that, the main one I clearly recall was during a particular battle with a key enemy boss. They just stopped, but considering how difficult that particular battle was at the time, I was more than happy to take full advantage of that. Beyond that, I can't think of any major bugs occurring during my playthrough. Nothing game breaking anyway. Overall, Phantom Liberty is an excellent expansion for Cyberpunk 2077. It adds even more length to an already long game in much the same way that Blood and Wine did for Witcher 3, and a must-play to fully experience. I really enjoyed it, and if you already liked the main game, then you're likely to have a good experience in it as well. And that concludes my review of Phantom Liberty for Cyberpunk 2077. If you've enjoyed this video and would like to see more videos in this series, be sure to hit the subscribe button, and also just check out my channel for further videos and you'll find out what else is available. And with that, this is Iceman of JReviews DLC signing out. Guys, have a good one.